Welcome, my name is Brian Nelson. This is the fourth lesson in the Introduction to Programming with C# course. In this lesson, we are going to introduce conditional data structures. Let's get started. Conditional data structures allow the programmer to branch the execution of the code based on one or more defined conditions. The simplest conditional structure is an if statement. The if statement tests one or more Boolean conditions. If the test passes, the program executes a defined branch of code. A simple test might be if a variable A equals a variable B. Just like Boolean variables, the Boolean condition in an if statement evaluates to a value of true or false. In our simple example, if A equals B, the condition evaluates to true. If A does not equal B, it evaluates to false. Often there is a need to test more than one condition. For instance, you may want to check if variable A equals variable B and variable C equals variable D. In this case, the code will execute if both of the tests return true. Another case that may be needed is to execute the branch if either variable A equals variable B or variable C equals variable D. In this case, if either test returns true, the branch of code will execute. Equality is not the only thing that can be tested for. Greater than, less than, greater than or equal, less than or equal are all possible tests that can be made. It is also possible to test for not equal. There is a whole topic on Boolean logic that may be investigated further as you advance as a developer. Let's take a look at how to set up these if statements in Visual Studio. I'm going to create a new project, create a console app, and I'm going to call this lesson 4. And it is going to go into source code, Ryan's coding corner, intro, and put it here. And so it'll be like that. And go ahead and create it. What we're going to go over in this lesson is we're going to go over if structures. And so we're going to get rid of the default. And we're going to declare a variable. And so we'll declare a double temperature equal, let's call it equal. And this is going to be Fahrenheit. We're going to call it 72. Now we're going to say, so to use an if structure, we basically define if and then open and close parentheses. And we're going to say temperature greater than or equal to, so that's our condition, 72 degrees. We are going to do that. And then we're going to say, let's see. Now we're going to define a string description. We're going to just, we're going to just do cold. We'll define this as cold. If the temperature is greater than 72, we're going to say the description is nice. Or we could say mild. So we do that, and then so all we're going to do here is we're going to say console.write. We're going to write description. So this is a very simple program. So we defined a temperature at 72 degrees. We have a string description. The default's to cold. And so what the description will be is if the temperature is less than 72, it will be cold. If the temperature is greater than 72, we're going to say mild. And so if we run this, we got an output of mild. Okay, let's set the temperature to 60, let's call it 62. And we will see, we'll run that, and we got an output of cold. Okay, so now let's debug it so we can step through and see what's going on. And I'm going to hit F10. And we're at the first line. Okay, so we are at our declaration of temperature, 62. Description is cold. We skip over that and we write the output. We're going to stop and we're going to say, okay, now the temperature is 92. Let's F5 just to run to that breakpoint. Okay, so now we're at 92. Okay, well, it's still listing mild. So, I mean, that seems limiting, and we're going to come back to this in the next portion of this lesson. Often, as a programmer, it is desired to execute one branch of code if a condition evaluates to true, and another branch if that condition evaluates to false. To handle this situation, an if-else structure is utilized. Let's take a look at using an if-else statement in Visual Studio. So we left it here where it's clearly not mild. So what we can do is in the if-else structure, we can say else. So we're going to say description equal hot. As we step through with F10, why did we get here? It's 92 and we wanted it to go to hot. Well, we're just saying greater than 70. So we need to add another condition. So we're going to say greater than 70 and temperature is less than 80. So let's step into this. And so between 70 and 80, it's going to be mild. We're 92, so we don't fit that. So now we're hot. So that is an if-else structure. So if it passes this condition, we go into here, and with an and, it has to be both. So if we pick 80, if we pick exactly 80, what do we think we're going to get? Because we're doing less than, we're going to say that's hot. So let's step into that. The less than or the greater than or equal says if it's equal to 70, we're going to go in here. But the less than means that we step over this. So that's hot. But if we go to 79.9, we are still in the mild category. So that is how an if-else structure. Whatever the conditions, if it passes this, it goes into the first block of code. Otherwise, it goes into the second block of code. So that is just a two possibility test. There are situations where multiple condition tests are required. As an example, you may want to test if variable A equals variable B and execute one branch of code. Then you may want to test if variable A equals variable C and execute another branch of code. Finally, for all other cases, execute another branch of code. To do this, an if-else structure can be used. Let's take a look at using the if-else structure in Visual Studio. Having just two choices isn't very clear. Maybe we want to add warm. So what we can do is we can say else if, and we're going to say the temperature is greater than or equal. So now we hit that 80. And the temperature is less than 90. Okay, we can then say, we're going to say the description is just warm. All right. And let's see how that works. So we're at 79. Let's put one into what we would hope to be warm, 82. And there we go. We're in the warm. And if we look, we will get warm on our output. That's perfect. Say we want to add another description, else if, drop that down just so we're consistent. So say we want to say if the temperature equals exactly 72, we are going to say description equals perfect. Do you think if we set this now to 72, is the way we've written this going to work? Well, it's not, and I'll show you why. So let's go into this. 72. Wait, okay, so we went into, it is between temperature of 70 and less than 80. So we hit that. So what happens here is, if we hit F10, we're done with that loop. So you only hit one block of code and you hit the first one that passes. If we wanted this, we would need to move it. And it needs to be our first condition. Okay, so we would need to say if temperature is equal to 72.0, and we're going to copy that. We're going to cut this and paste it up here. And then we're going to say else if great. And we'll get rid of this one down here now. So now the first block of code will be the default, which is cold. So that would be less than 70. Perfect would be 72. Anything else in that would be mild. Then we go between 80 and 90, warm, and greater than 90 or equal to 90, hot. So let's see if that works now. And F10, and we're stepping through with F10. Okay, we're 72, and so the output's going to be perfect. If we look at our output, that's correct. Finish that. So now, but if it's 72.5 with a double, we're not perfect. We're just in the mild between 70 and 80. And so we'll get a mild answer. If we go to 85 and hit F5, I'm going to run to my breakpoint. Okay, and then I'm going to hit F10. So we're going to hit warm because 85 is between 80 and 90. That's great. And so all we're doing is testing our different cases. And so now let's say 95. And hit F5 to run, and then F10 to step over, and we end up in our else case. So none of these are true. Now, let's see. So we're hot. Now let's try one other thing. Let's try a test of 32 degrees. And what's going to happen here? We're in hot. Well, that's not right. Well, our else structure is everything else. It's not just greater than 90. So what we need to do, we'll go up here and we're going to say else if temperature is less than 60. We're going to add another 0.0. And we're going to move this. So if it's less, our description is going to be cold. Okay. And then we're going to say, we're going to change this to be nice. And we're going to add another else if, we're going to say temperature is greater than or equal to 60 and temperature is less than or equal, or less than, 70. We're going to call that description equals mild. So now, if we're less than 60, we're cold. If we're between 60 and 70, we're mild. If it's exactly 72, we're perfect. If it's between 70 and 80, we're nice, and then warm, and then hot. So let's see how that works at our 32 now. So I hit F5, F10, F10, step. We get cold, less than 60. So perfect. And if we look at our output, it says cold. So that's doing exactly what we want. So you can add as many of these if structures as you want. And else if you can have as many as you want. Each one of them takes a little bit of processing, so you've got to keep that in mind. But basically, you can kind of break this down into as many levels as you'd like. In complex situations where you are testing one variable for multiple values, a switch statement exists. The switch statement is a concise format for an if, else structure. If a user is asked to enter a number to choose a color, like enter 1 to pick red, enter 2 to pick blue, enter 3 to pick green, and so on, rather than set up code like if value equals 1, else if value equals 2, else if value equals 3, and so on, the programmer creates a switch statement on the value and tests for cases of 1, 2, or 3. Let's set up this situation in Visual Studio. There are a lot of else if statements, and the structure gets big. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment out this block of code for now. There's another structure, and it doesn't really work well in that example because it doesn't work well with doubles. So we're going to say int temp range equals 0. And we're going to say, just as a comment, 0 is going to be cold, 1 is going to be mild, 2 is going to be nice, 3 is going to be warm, and 4 is going to be hot. So what we might say is if temp range equals 0, description is temperature is less than 60. Okay, so for cold, temperature is less than 60. Else if temp range equals 1, then we're going to say description equals temperature is greater than or equal to 60 and less than 70. We're going to copy this now. So I'm going to make that 2. And this will be between greater than or equal to 70 and less than 80. I forgot semicolons, so let's put those in. I'm going to copy that again. Okay, and this is going to be 3. That's between 80 and 90. And then we'll paste that in again. It's 4, so now the temperature is greater than 90. Perfect. This is often a setup where you pick what temperature range would you like, cold, mild, nice, warm, or hot. And based on a distinct choice, some block of code gets run. So that's one way we can do that. Let's look at case 2, and we're going to run to our breakpoint. We'll put it there. We'll clear out this breakpoint, and we'll hit F5 to run. And so we can see our temp range is 2. And we see that we get that description, and then we write it to the output, and we see temperatures between 70 and 80. So that's a standard thing that might need to happen. Based on some distinct choices, a block of code gets to run. And this is setting the description is kind of a trivial action, but it's a legitimate action in a block of code. Well, if this gets more and more, that gets very verbose. So let's look at a different way of writing that. And to do that, we can use a switch statement. And we're going to switch on the temperature range. And so for each case 1, break, and then we can say case 2, and it's case and the value, and then a colon, and then break. And what the break does is say we're going to exit that block of code. All right. So, and then, and I missed one. Case 0. I'll add that. Now we have the same cases we hear, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy down, and I'm going to leave this code because that way you can see it. And we'll do that. Copy this one. Paste that there. Copy this one. And then copy our last one. I'm going to comment out, rather than go through this, I'm going to comment out that. We're going to go through that same value of 2, temperature range equal 2. And so let's F10 through that. Temperature range equal 2. And so you can see it jumps straight down to between 70 and 80. And then we can output that. There we go. It's much more concise than the if, else if structure. And so the challenge is it has to be a distinct value. It wouldn't have worked well with our doubles because we would have had to capture every possibility. One thing I like to do is, because this is an integer, let's say we pick a value out of range. So what's going to happen? I put a breakpoint right at the switch statement. And I'm going to run to our breakpoint, so F5. Now you can see our temp range is 5. Our current description is the default of cold, which is defined up at the top, cold, still from our first example. Now 5 is not defined here. We skip over and we're going to print out cold. Well, that's really not what we want. So we need to handle unknown cases because we're going to have the unknown value of 5. So what we can do is we can say default description unknown temperature range specified. And we might throw an error, we might do something else. We haven't discussed errors and handling, so we'll come back to that. But for now, we're just going to put out a warning. And so now if we run, we hit F5, it'll go to our breakpoint. Great, we're going to hit F10. We're not in one of our defined cases, we're in all other cases, unknown temperature range, and now that gets output. That's a way of handling all other cases. This wraps up the 4th lesson. In our next lesson, we will look at looping data structures.